is a rather earnest student. She'll always try her best and hand in her assignments on time. Although she gets very easily upset at herself whenever she gets something wrong. Ari doesn't really have any subject she's particularly bad at. Roughly above average grades. K is, well, she'll need more attention than the others. Her grades are below average, and it's not for lack of trying. Kay will always try her best while in class, and she gets her assignments in on time most of the time, although she does forget every now and then. Kay just has a harder time understanding certain things and will need a lot of personal tutoring. Just stay on top of her and she should do fine. Her best subject is history, but even then her grades there are still average at best. Though I will say, no one beats her zoology knowledge. Fu is a rather easygoing student. His grades are a little above average, although they could likely be higher if he cared to put his all into it. Unfortunately, due to the fact that certain subjects can be rather boring, it's hard for Fu to pay attention. I don't blame him, considering his quirk. Boredom for him is much worse than it is for others. For him, it's important to try and make things as interesting as possible. And make sure he's engaged. He's really good at math, but his history skills can vary depending on the subject. Kiba's grades are overall average to below average. This time it is for lack of trying. Kiba despises being in class, although she knows it's necessary. If you can find a way to properly motivate her, her grades will likely go up by a good margin. Sansan is similar to Kiba in that she hates classes, but even more so than Kiba. Although surprisingly, her hate for being in class motivates her to do better in class. She's aware that if she performs poorly in class, she'll have to spend more time being tutored, so she tries her best to avoid that. As a result, her grades are actually pretty good. Although her handwriting is so bad that reading down what she writes can be difficult. Kyoku, despite being one of the younger students, Kyoku is actually one of the best students. You see, Kyoku loves praise, so she'll try extremely hard during class, so long as you praise her for her efforts. It's pretty simple, just make sure to help her if she looks like she's struggling. She won't ask for help. Shiroku, there isn't much to talk about when it comes to Shiroku's performance in classes. Both her grades, and the effort she puts in, are perfectly okay. She's a little better at history than other things, but not by much. Yami always tries his best, however sometimes the fact that he spent most of his life in a forest means he has a hard time catching up in certain subjects, namely history and math. Although considering his situation, he has made extremely impressive progress. Thankfully, he's not shy about asking for help, so if he's really struggling, he'll tell you. Fuku's grades are a little above average. She doesn't seem to care about doing anything other than not failing and often gets bored during lessons. You'll catch her spaced out, although this isn't on purpose, so just kinda check on her every now and then and make sure she's still paying attention. Especially during math and history. She excels at pretty much anything creative. Otoko, due to being one of the younger kids, he needs a bit more attention to make sure he understands everything. And make sure to pay extra attention to him in case he's struggling since he can't talk to call out for help. Although the other kids usually help with that. Kai, due to Kai's size, he can't attend class in person and has to do so over video call. So it can be hard for him to see things. He also can't really write anything down, so just make sure to accommodate him. Also due to his younger age, he can have difficulty keeping up, particularly in math. Mu is very much a visual learner. He won't pipe up much, but he is pretty much always paying attention. His grades in just about everything are above average. Just make sure he's actually in class before you start. Yonda, don't worry about Yonda's grades or performance in class. Her grades are pretty much perfect and will likely remain perfect. Just make sure she doesn't gloat about her grades or act condescending about them to other kids. Netsu's grades are surprisingly good despite his dislike of being in class. I guess that's just his dedication to not doing anything half-heartedly. Although he can struggle at times with science. Ken is actually really smart and has a great memory. The problem is that out of all the children, he probably hates being in class the most. He puts almost zero effort into any of his assignments and almost never pays attention during class. And his grades reflect this. I've convinced him to put a bit more effort into math and science, but his grades there are still a very poor reflection of his potential. Nara has some of the highest grades of all the kids. Near perfect grades in every subject, and she's gone above and beyond in studying things beyond the curriculum. Don't worry about her, just make sure to answer any questions she has. If you need someone else to tutor another kid, ask her. AKA's grades are perfectly fine in things like math and science, but a bit low elsewhere. And she gets a bit too invested in history lessons. Don't let her rant about things, otherwise the class time will be doubled. Niece has forgotten most of what she was taught, and thus her grades are rather poor. Although she tries hard to amend this. Sheena's grades are perfectly average in every regard. No need to give her any more or less attention than anyone else. Just don't let her do anything that requires any amount of dexterity. Alice is a rather intelligent and hardworking student, and her grades would likely be higher if it weren't for her having to adjust to her new surroundings and a new language. Just make sure to help her if she has trouble understanding something. She should be able to do the rest. Jin. The main issue for Jin is motivation. Just getting him to class is a huge hassle, and getting to stay awake during class is a bigger hassle. His grades are practically non-existent due to him not participating in most tests. Yaba, despite her somewhat thuggish demeanor, Yaba's grades are actually above average. This was mainly out of spite, as people would often assume she was the brutish dumb one of the trio, and so she started seriously studying out of spite. G probably has the best grades out of the kids, with Nara and Yonda competing with her, although she often pulls ahead, except in history. She's far more interested in science and math, mostly science, and often spends time in the lab. Inu, much like her sisters, has rather excellent grades, mainly because she has her sisters to help her, but it's not like she's lacking in intelligence either. She excels in science, not to the same degree as G, but she's still pretty good. And much like G, she has a bit more difficulty with history. Lu actually already had a pretty in-depth education, and is familiar with most subjects we're teaching, although he could use a refresher. Recent history is the only real thing he's completely unfamiliar with. Himiko is also a pretty adept student, with grades close to those at the top. She does this exclusively to be praised, so make sure to do so regularly. Her best subject is surprisingly math, which she is a natural at. Currently Tenko has not participated in classes. Hopefully, we should get him to attend in a week or so. Oki is a rather good student, provided he doesn't get distracted by hunger. Normally snacks are not permitted during class, but for him, we can make an exception. Kano's grades are above average, much to her frustration. She very much wants to be in the upper echelons of grades, if only to brag about it. Hopefully, she finds solace in her dressmaking skills. Odo's grades are a little above average, but he doesn't seem to have any real passion for classes. It seems like he's satisfied with his current level. Ko is a bit of a troublemaker in class. She'll often try to perform her pranks during class, such as hiding whoopee cushions in people's seats, and putting a water bucket over the door, messing with the projector, hiding supplies, etc. She also doesn't seem to pay much attention during class. As such, her grades are overall poor. Kuki is also disinterested in class, although that may be because he's currently not very pleased with me. Perhaps now that you're teaching, he'll be a bit more motivated. Seikyo, given that she is less than a couple months old, she has a lot to learn. Fortunately, she's very intelligent and quick to adapt. So given a few months of personal tutoring, she should catch up. Sorry, my only advice is to prepare yourself for pain, and keep headache medicine on hand.